Black waitress serves millionaire's deaf grandmother. Her secret left everyone speechless. "You can't be serious." Manager Victoria Pierce's sharp voice echoed through Silverstone, one of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants. "A waitress like you serving the Hartwell family's VIP table?" Kesha Johnson, 24, held her tray steady as she met Victoria's contemptuous gaze. At her feet, shards of a fine Chinese porcelain plate, dropped moments earlier, formed a mosaic of deliberate humiliation. The crash had made every kitchen staff member stop and stare. "Clean up this mess and get back to the kitchen where you belong," Victoria continued, straightening her Chanel blazer as she shot a knowing glance at the other white waiters. "Table 12 is no place for people like you." Kesha never imagined her 2 years washing dishes and serving leftovers in that temple of New York's elite would lead to this moment. But something in Victoria's tone, those 3 words, "people like you," awakened a strength she had learned to control since childhood. "With all due respect, Victoria," Kesha replied with a calmness that even surprised herself. "I was specifically assigned to this table by Mr. Hartwell. If you have a problem with that, perhaps you should take it up with him." A tense silence swept through the kitchen. Over the past few months, Kesha had noticed the signs, the way Victoria gave her the worst shifts, forgot to include her in group tips, and always found some fault in her work. But tonight would be different. James Hartwell III had called personally that morning, requesting that the waitress who talks with her hands serve his table. Victoria nearly choked on her coffee when she heard it, clearly not understanding what it meant. The truth was, Kesha had a secret. Something from her past that no one there, not even Victoria, could have imagined. Something that would soon change how everyone saw her. "Fine," Victoria spat. "But when you ruin the night for the most important family in this restaurant, don't say I didn't warn you. And if a single detail goes wrong..." She let the threat hang in the air, smiling with the cruelty of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. Kesha nodded silently, but her eyes showed a determination that didn't go unnoticed. Some of the staff realized this young woman carried something special, a quiet strength born from surviving far worse storms. As she walked toward the main hall where the Hartwell family waited, Kesha held herself with the poise of someone guarding a secret too powerful to reveal before the right moment. Victoria had no idea she was about to witness something that would forever change the restaurant's hierarchy. If this story of prejudice and courage touches your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to see how one simple act of communication would spark a revolution no one would ever forget. The main hall of Silverstone shimmered under the golden evening lights. Kesha moved between Italian marble tables, her steps echoing softly in the reverent hush that always greeted VIP guests. At table 12, by the windows overlooking Central Park, the Hartwell family waited. James Hartwell III, 35, looked every inch the heir to a financial empire. Tailored suit, watch worth more than Kesha's yearly salary, and the easy confidence of a man who never had to prove anything to anyone. Beside him, a poised blonde woman typed furiously on her phone, clearly his wife. But it was the third person at the table who caught Kesha's attention instantly. Mrs. Dorothy Hartwell, 78, observed the bustling room with intelligent, curious eyes. Her silver hair was tied in a graceful bun, and her navy blue dress exuded understated elegance. There was something about her, a slight tilt of the head, the way her eyes darted constantly, searching for cues, that Kesha recognized right away. "Good evening." "Mr. Hartwell," Kesha greeted in her best professional tone. "My name is Kesha, and I'll have the pleasure of serving you tonight." James smiled politely, but his wife didn't even look up. "We want the wine list right away," she muttered, still typing. "And bring the appetizers quickly. We have an appointment at 10. Kesha nodded, but her gaze lingered on Mrs. Dorothy, who seemed lost in the conversation happening around her. It was a painfully familiar sight, the deaf person treated like background while others made decisions for them. "And for you, ma'am?" Kesha asked gently, positioning herself within the elderly woman's line of sight. Mrs. Dorothy looked toward James, confused. He sighed impatiently. "She always has Chardonnay. No need to ask. That's when Kesha made a decision that would change everything. She moved directly in front of Mrs. Dorothy and, with graceful precision, signed, "Good evening, ma'am. It's a pleasure to meet you. What would you like to drink tonight?" The effect was immediate, like lightning striking the table. Mrs. Dorothy's eyes widened, her hands trembled slightly, and a radiant smile spread across her face. James dropped his napkin, stunned, while his wife finally lowered her phone. You talk with your hands," Mrs. Dorothy signed back, tears welling in her eyes. "It's been so long since anyone spoke directly to me." "Yes, ma'am," Kesha replied in fluent sign language. "And I'd love to know what you'd prefer to drink. We have an exceptional German Riesling that pairs beautifully with our salmon." The sign language conversation continued for several minutes, with Mrs. Dorothy eagerly asking about the menu, making light jokes about the food, and for the first time in a long while, becoming the center of attention in a positive way. James watched in fascination, clearly moved to see his grandmother so full of life again. "How did you learn that?" he asked Kesha, still trying to process what he had just seen. Kesha smiled softly. "My younger sister was born deaf, sir. Sign language was my second language before I even learned to read." What she didn't mention was the rest of the story. How at 16, she had become her sister's guardian after their parents died in a car accident. How she worked 3 jobs to pay for Amara's special school. How every penny she earned at Silverstone still went towards speech therapy and learning materials. How her own college education had been put on hold indefinitely so Amara could have every opportunity. Victoria watched from the kitchen doorway, her face twisting with an expression that mixed disbelief with something far darker, pure anger. Seeing Kesha receive attention and praise from the restaurant's most important family struck a nerve that ran deep. For the next hour, Kesha waited tables with a devotion that went beyond professionalism. She translated jokes between Mrs. Dorothy and James, described ingredients with visual clarity, and for the first time in years, the elderly woman was fully included in the family's conversation. "Grandma is happier than I've seen her in months," James said as Kesha served the main course. "Where do you usually work?" "Because I want to make sure you always serve our table." "Actually, sir, I normally work in the kitchen. This is my first night waiting tables," Kesha admitted. James's face changed immediately. "You work in the kitchen with that kind of talent? Who made that decision?" Before Kesha could answer, Victoria appeared beside the table like a storm dressed in black. "Mr. Hartwell, I hope everything is perfect." "Kesha is still in training, so if there are any problems—" "Actually," James interrupted, his tone carrying the authority of someone used to commanding boardrooms, "I'm impressed. Kesha has given us the best service we've ever had here. My grandmother is communicating directly with someone for the first time in months." Victoria forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "How wonderful." "I'm sure it was." "Interesting." The way she said interesting told Kesha her night was far from over. Victoria wasn't the type to forgive when an employee stepped out of line, especially if it led to praise she felt was undeserved. As the Hartwell family finished dessert, Victoria pulled Kesha aside into a quiet corner. "My office. Midnight. Don't be late." Kesha nodded calmly, but something in Victoria's eyes triggered an old, familiar alertness. It was the same look she had seen on a social worker's face years ago when they tried to separate her and Amara, the look of someone who viewed her strength as a threat. But Victoria made a fatal mistake that night. She assumed Kesha was just another desperate employee willing to endure anything to keep her job. What she didn't realize was that when you raise someone to be strong from the age of 16, when you teach them to fight for every opportunity and protect those they love, you're not dealing with an ordinary victim. Kesha had spent 8 years navigating systems that weren't built for people like her. Welfare offices, hospitals, special schools, employment agencies. She knew how to spot predators a mile away. She knew when she was being tested, and more importantly, she knew exactly how people like Victoria thought. As she cleared the table after the Hartwells left, Kesha maintained the same calm that had intrigued her co-workers earlier. What Victoria couldn't imagine was that this problematic waitress held not just the secret of sign language, but 8 years of experience fighting far greater powers and winning. Every insult she was about to endure, every humiliation Victoria planned, would be carefully memorized and stored away. Because Kesha had learned a crucial lesson while caring for Amara. Sometimes you must let people underestimate you completely before showing them what you're truly capable of. At midnight sharp, Victoria Pierce's office felt even more suffocating under the cold neon light. Kesha entered to find the manager sitting behind her metal desk, surrounded by stacks of employee evaluations and a cup of cold coffee. "Sit down," Victoria ordered without looking up from her papers. "Let's talk about your performance today." Kesha remained standing, instantly recognizing the intimidation tactic. She'd seen the same routine in countless offices, social services, police stations, and school meetings while fighting for Amara's rights. "Listen carefully, Kesha," Victoria said at last, raising her eyes, cold and hard. "I've been running this restaurant for 12 years. I know my place, and more importantly, I know everyone else's. People like you," she paused deliberately, "need to understand there are limits." "Limits, ma'am?" Kesha asked in a controlled voice. "Don't play dumb. You know exactly what I mean." Victoria rose slowly, circling the desk. "Yesterday you were just another dishwasher. Today, by some stroke of luck, you managed to impress an important customer, but that doesn't change who you are." What Victoria didn't realize was that every word was being silently recorded in Kesha's memory. She had learned that people like Victoria always revealed their true motives when they believed they were untouchable. "Starting tomorrow," Victoria continued, "you'll return to the kitchen permanently, and to make sure there are no future misunderstandings, you'll work the morning shift from 5 to 2 every day, including weekends." It was a calculated punishment. Victoria knew the schedule would make it impossible for Kesha to take any second job, trapping her at Silverstone with the lowest wage possible. "I understand," Kesha replied simply. The calm in her voice clearly irritated Victoria, who had expected tears, begging, or at least fear. "You understand? That's it? You're not going to beg to keep your position waiting tables?" "No, ma'am. I appreciate the opportunity to work here." Victoria narrowed her eyes. "Good, then there will be no problems. And Kesha, if I find out you're trying to go around my orders, talk to customers, or do anything beyond your job, you'll be out on the street that same day. There are 10 people waiting for your spot." Kesha nodded and turned toward the door. "Oh, and one more thing," Victoria added with a venomous smile. "Your special little sister Amara, right? Those special schools are expensive. It would be a shame if something affected your ability to pay for them." The threat hung in the air like poison. Kesha stopped with her hand on the doorknob but didn't turn around. "I understand perfectly, ma'am. Good evening." When she left the office, Kesha kept the same composed expression until she reached the locker room. Alone, her eyes finally burned with anger, but it wasn't wild rage. It was the steady, focused fury of someone who had just witnessed something she refused to let slide. She took out her phone and opened a voice recording app. "Report 1, she murmured. Wednesday, 11:47 p.m., Victoria Pierce. "Direct threats involving racial discrimination and blackmail concerning my sister's disability." What Victoria didn't know was that Kesha's history had prepared her for this. 8 years of fighting bureaucracy had taught her to document everything, every suspicious comment, every unfair policy, every verbal threat. The next morning, as she arrived at 5 a.m. for her new schedule, Kesha noticed a familiar car parked outside, James Hartwell's black BMW. He met her by the employee entrance, still wearing the same suit from the day before. "Kesha, good morning. Can I speak with you for a moment?" "Of course, Mr. Hartwell, though I'm due to start work in a few minutes." "Work? You're not waiting tables today?" "No, sir. I've been permanently reassigned to the kitchen." "Why?" "Your performance yesterday was outstanding. My grandmother can't stop talking about you." Kesha hesitated. She knew that one wrong word could mean immediate dismissal if Victoria heard about it, but something in James's sincere tone made her take a chance. "Mr. Hartwell, may I speak frankly? I'd love to keep serving your table and your grandmother's. Yesterday meant a lot to me, too. But some people here have very specific opinions about where I should be." James studied her expression carefully. "Are we talking about discrimination?" "We're talking about internal politics I need to respect to keep my job, sir." The diplomatic answer told him everything. I see. Kesha, I'd like to make you an offer. Would you be interested in working directly for my family? We often host events where we need someone who can communicate with my grandmother. The pay would be far better than your current job. Kesha's heart raced. It was the exact opportunity Victoria wanted to deny her. That would be incredible, sir. But I'd need to give 2 weeks' notice here. Of course. And Kesha, if anyone tries to make trouble or block your departure, call me immediately. He handed her his card. My personal number. As James left, Kesha looked down at the card and smiled for the first time in months. Victoria had made a grave mistake. She thought Kesha was just another powerless worker with no allies. What she couldn't imagine was that this simple dishwasher had spent 8 years learning that systems only change when you force them to. And now, with a powerful ally and years of carefully documented evidence, Kesha finally had the tools to make Victoria face the consequences of every humiliation. That afternoon, while washing dishes during her punishment shift, Kesha organized her thoughts like a strategist. Every recorded conversation, every witness, every discriminatory act, all of it would be used at the perfect moment. Victoria watched, from the kitchen window, satisfied to see Kesha back in her place. What she couldn't see was the quiet fire in the eyes of a woman who had learned to turn injustice into power. Because when you teach someone to fight unfair systems from the age of 16, when you train a person to protect the people they love, you don't create a victim. You forge an adversary who knows exactly how to bring down those who abuse power. And Victoria was about to learn that she had underestimated the wrong woman. Kesha's second week of notice was ending when James Hartwell arrived at Silverstone for an unexpected meeting with the owner. Victoria nervously adjusted her blazer. Unscheduled visits from investors were never a good sign. Mr. Hartwell, she greeted him with her most professional smile. What a wonderful surprise. How can I help you today? Actually, Victoria, I came to talk to you specifically about Kesha Johnson. James kept his tone neutral, but something in his eyes made the manager's stomach clench. Ah, yes, Kesha, a suitable employee. Although she has had some discipline issues recently, Victoria said quickly, trying to control the situation before it got out of hand. Discipline issues? James raised an eyebrow. Can you give me specific examples? Well, she broke protocols. She acted outside her position. You understand? People like her sometimes need to be reminded about hierarchies and boundaries. The Buan. Phrase people like her hung in the air like an involuntary confession. James made a careful mental note. Interesting. And what exactly was the protocol she broke? Victoria realized she was treading on dangerous ground, but her arrogance prevented her from backing down. She communicated directly with your grandmother without permission. Employees at her level should not interact with VIP clients without proper supervision. I see. So, you punished an employee for providing excellent customer service? James's voice remained calm. I reassigned her to a position more suited to her qualifications. It was at that moment that Kesha appeared carrying a tray from the kitchen. Victoria immediately called her over. Kesha, come here, please. Kesha approached calmly, but James noticed something different in her eyes, a serene confidence that hadn't been there 2 weeks ago. Mr. Hartwell would like to talk to you about your transition to the new position, Victoria said, clearly expecting Kesha to confirm the official version of events. Of course, Kesha replied, taking her phone out of her pocket. Actually, Mr. Hartwell, I have carefully documented our entire conversation about this transition. It might be useful in clearing up some misunderstandings. Victoria's face instantly paled. Documented? What do you mean by that? Kesha tapped the screen of her phone. Victoria's voice echoed clearly through the speaker. People like you need to understand that there are limits. Your special little sister, Amara, isn't she? It would be a shame if something affected your ability to pay for them. The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria stared at the phone as if it were a poisonous snake. There's more, Kesha continued, her voice perfectly calm. 3 weeks of similar comments, discriminatory schedules applied only to black employees, and multiple witnesses to your questionable management practices. James studied Victoria, who was now breathing heavily. Victoria, do you have anything to say about these accusations? She's taking everything out of context. She's a disgruntled employee trying to frame me, Victoria stammered, her composure completely shattered. Context? Kesha raised an eyebrow. Let's hear the full context. Then she played another recording. Victoria's voice filled the space again. I've been running this restaurant for 12 years. I know my place, and more importantly, I know everyone else's place here. People like you need to understand that there are limits. James turned to Victoria with an expression she had never seen before. The controlled fury of someone accustomed to destroying careers with a single decision. Victoria, as the principal, investor in this establishment, I am officially terminating our partnership. You have until the end of the day to clear out your office. You can't do that, Victoria exploded, her mask of professionalism finally slipping. Because of this. Go on, James challenged her. Finish that sentence in front of witnesses. Victoria realized the trap and closed her mouth, but it was too late. Every word, every glance, every reaction was being observed by employees who had suffered years of her discriminatory behavior. Kesha calmly put away her phone. Mr. Hartwell, I believe our conversation about the new position can continue in a more professional setting. James nodded, watching Victoria crumble before his eyes. Certainly, Victoria. My attorney will be in touch regarding the legal aspects of this situation. I recommend you consult yours. As they walked out, leaving Victoria trembling in her own restaurant, James turned to Kesha. How long have you been planning this? 8 years, Kesha replied simply. Ever since I learned that documenting injustices is the only way to ensure they have consequences. Victoria watched through the window as James and Kesha talked outside. For the first time in her career, she had completely underestimated someone, not just an employee, but a strategist who turned every humiliation into evidence, every abuse into ammunition for her own downfall. At that moment, Victoria finally understood that she had wasted years trying to break someone who was unbreakable from the start. And now, surrounded by the satisfied glances of employees she had mistreated, she realized that her reputation, her job, and her career had been methodically destroyed by the very person she despised most. Victoria's phone rang. It was the restaurant owner who had just received a very interesting call from James Hartwell about documented discriminatory practices and possible lawsuits. Meanwhile, outside, Kesha finally allowed herself to smile. Not out of cruelty, but out of long overdue justice. Because when you teach someone to be strong from the age of 16, when you force a person to become a strategist in order to survive, you're not creating a victim. You are forging someone capable of turning every injustice into fuel for their own rise. Victoria had underestimated a woman who carried 8 years of experience fighting unjust systems and winning. And now, as she watched her career crumble in real time, she finally understood that she had chosen the wrong adversary. The real question now was not whether Victoria would survive this exposure professionally. It was whether she would ever be able to look in the mirror without remembering the moment when a simple waitress proved that intelligence and preparation always beat arrogance and prejudice. 6 months later, the Hartwell Hotel's event hall glowed under golden lights as it hosted the first annual Inclusion Gala. Kesha Johnson, now Director of Community Relations for the Hartwell family, adjusted the microphone on the main stage, preparing to present the sign language training program she had developed. Ladies and gentlemen, she signed simultaneously. As she spoke, today we celebrate not only inclusion, but proof that when we give people real opportunities, they always exceed our expectations. In the front row, Dorothy Hartwell applauded enthusiastically. Beside her, James smiled proudly, knowing that this gala was a direct result of Kesha's vision. The program had already trained more than 200 employees at hotels in the chain, transforming the experience of deaf guests across the country. My sister Amara, Kesha continued, always told me that our difference is not our limitation, it is our superpower. And she was right. Amara, now a graphic design student at a prestigious university thanks to the scholarship James had created specifically for her, waved from the audience with tears in her eyes. Meanwhile, just 15 blocks away, Victoria Pierce watched the live stream on her cracked cell phone in her one-bedroom apartment. After losing her job at Silverstone, she discovered that the recording of her discriminatory statements had spread across social media. No restaurant or hospitality company in Manhattan wanted to associate its name with the racial scandal she had created. Her former colleagues, who had once respected her authority, now avoided her at industry events. The last week had been particularly brutal. Her application for a position in New Jersey was rejected after a simple Google search revealed dozens of articles about the racist manager of Silverstone. Back at the gala, a former Silverstone employee took the stage. Kesha taught me that dignity is not something other people can give us or take away, he signed and spoke. It's something we carry within us, regardless of how we are treated. The irony did not go unnoticed by the audience. Here was a woman who had been systematically humiliated and diminished, now leading a cultural change that would affect thousands of lives. James stood up, initiating a standing ovation that lasted nearly 2 minutes. Victoria hung up her phone in anger, but the reality was inescapable. Kesha had not only weathered the storm, she had become the storm. While Victoria languished in irrelevance and regret, her former employee was building a legacy that the hotel industry itself celebrated. True revenge, Kesha concluded her speech, is not to destroy those who have hurt us. It is to build something so beautiful and powerful that it makes it impossible to ignore our humanity. It is to transform our pain into the fuel of our greatness. The final applause echoed through the hall and across the screens of cell phones where thousands watched live. Victoria had tried to break Kesha through prejudice and arrogance but ended up creating the exact opposite, a leader who would forever change how the industry treated marginalized people. 2 years later, when Victoria finally landed a job as a hostess at a small cafe in Queens, she occasionally saw news stories about the awards Kesha was receiving for innovation in corporate inclusion. The program had expanded to more than 50 companies, and Kesha was regularly invited to speak at universities about leadership and social justice. The lesson was crystal clear. When you try to destroy someone out of pure prejudice, you're not only revealing your own smallness, you're providing that person with all the motivation they need to become everything you could never be. If this story of transformation and justice touched your heart, subscribe to the channel for more narratives that prove our greatest victory is not defeating our enemies, but building a world where they become irrelevant in the face of the greatness we choose to create.